The city of San Francisco goes by many names. The City by the Bay and the Golden City are some of these names, but the one I feel like describes the city the best is Fog City. San Francisco has soul to it, openly showing evidence of the history that went through the streets since 1776. Notable landmarks like the Golden Gate Bridge and transportation methods like the cable car system gives you this sense of freedom, like you're able to travel anywhere your eye sees. Whether you're driving up and down the bumpy hills or taking a ferry around the bay, you can't help but feel this blanket of culture being wrapped around you as you hear the stories of the land for those willing to listen. At the same time though, there's also a sense of foreboding mystery that lingers when you spend a lot of time there. Walking to the bay is easy to spot Alcatraz Island, a federal prison that once housed some of the country's notorious criminals and carried a reputation that bragged about how no one could escape. The image of the unstoppable city you see hugging the bay gets a bit distorted when you learn about the devastating 1906 earthquake that destroyed 80% of the city. Finally, if you stay out, you'll see a fog that eerily creeps into the city and the bay, covering most of its surface. This fog is something that I remember fondly of when I would visit my family there, and it never failed to give me the chills seeing the fog interact with the land when I was a child. This is the setting that author Andrew Velasco sets his book Blood on the Hills in. And I want to say right off the bat, this book totally gets the BookBase's seal of approval because it's a great read. I mean, the book's about a turf war that is taking place in Chinatown and the outskirts of that area in San Francisco. And it is just so fun. I mean, the way that, I just described the atmosphere of San Francisco, the author does a great job at, kind of adding those details in to create that sense of suspense that comes with kind of witnessing this turf war take action. I mean, you see different gangs doing different things to kind of get their own upper hand in, gaining their territory. But, seeing some of the things that come out in the city, like the eerie fog that I mentioned earlier, I mean, that just kind of it adds that tension when you're looking behind your shoulder and you're like, what the heck is out there that's going to catch me while I'm out trying to do something for my gang? Furthermore, this book takes multiple perspectives, and I think that just adds more of a realistic depiction of what it's like to witness a turf war, because like I mentioned earlier, these gangs are doing different things. So you have Tone Marcelli that operates this Italian mob, and his whole thing is he's trying to prove to his father, the Don, that he's capable of leading a gang, so he kind of does his own thing to stir the pot. And then right after you read about him, you go into Leo, who's part of the Chinese triad gang called the Night Dragon in Chinatown. And his dad just passes away, and his whole thing is he's trying to prove to his group that he's capable of leading a gang that, just escaped Hong Kong, and they're trying to operate, drug lines through the city. And nobody believes him. Why? Because he's young, and people think that he's inept when it comes to, the hardcore stuff that goes behind the business. And this guy Leo, he's trying to prove them wrong. And then right after that, you get Mirko, who's a Serbian he's a soldier that was fighting against fighting in the Serbian war. He escaped to go to San Francisco to look for a better life, and instead he got a heroin addiction, and he ends up somehow joining the Orlov family, which is the Russian gang that does watch a lot of the Russian the territory in San Francisco. For fans of A Song of Fire and Ice and The Sopranos, you're definitely going to see these influences take place in the book. The book does a great job at creating, or I wouldn't say the book, sorry. The author does a great job at making each of these characters feel unique, so you don't feel like you're reading the same perspective twice. On top of that, this author, Andrew Velasco, does a great job at depicting the honesty behind these characters. Even though they want to hide it to people in the story, for us, the audience that's reading this, we get to see what they do during their highs and lows. We see some of their addictions. We see what they do to corrupt other people into being a part of their fight. And this kind of, again, adds another layer to showing, that toughness that comes with having to be a part of a crime syndicate. When it comes to organized crime, I mean, it's not a clean life, right? Like, it's really murky and it's really ugly. You're gonna read this book and you might get a scene where you literally read about a guy burning alive that's strapped down to a chair, and the guy that did all of it, he just walks off to smoke a cigarette to numb the sights and the smells that he's experiencing in that room. Or, you have somebody using heroin to kind of escape the actions that they were forced to commit to stay alive. I think seeing these bad habits are important because it kind of amplifies the stakes to kind of show how far people are willing to go to get their piece of the Bay Area. That doesn't mean that these characters are invincible, as they carry the ghosts of their past with them. We see some characters have nightmares after trying to convince themselves that they had to do something they regret immensely. We have some characters toughened by the hardships of their past, turning them into heartless killers who will do anything to stay in power. These same characters are also not invincible to death, as there would be moments I'd feel like I just met a character and soon after, their head would be cracked open on a floor of a random warehouse. I think this aspect is gory, but it's cool because it serves as an honest attempt at recreating organized crime, one that comes with the cost of seeing lives being taken. Now, this novel also does a great job at depicting the perks of working in this life as well, giving freedom to choices that come with being a higher rank. The more you climb, the more money you make, the more luxuries you can afford within the clan. More importantly, the more secrets you get to keep, as there's multiple members that have mistresses outside of their marriage and addictions that can ultimately lead to your downfall if they get exposed. We get a sense of how addicting this power struggle can be, seeing how desperate some characters are to stay in control of their lives. It makes sense because for some of these people, this lifestyle took them from a life of poverty to one of riches and access to a higher status in society. And that's an addicting feeling. Imagine going from the slums to eating at a restaurant that's on the top floor of a skyscraper. It's a whole different world. In this book, we also see how far some of these characters are willing to go to keep chasing that high, sometimes letting it lead to their own downfall. I won't spoil anything because I do think this is an amazing book, and if you have a chance, I think it's worth reading, but I do want to end by talking about the epilogue of this book. After reading the resolution of the war and seeing how the plot ends, you're met with an excerpt that includes this sentence. Time moves forward as it always does. The people will change, the names will fade, new foundations will arrive, but the bay will remain the same. Oh my god. I think this is so cool because usually when I read an epilogue, I'm not expecting a crazy takeaway. Usually the epilogue is usually like a sentence or two to maybe kind of hint that there's a sequel coming, or the epilogue is just a way to give like a really sweet ending to like whatever you just read. But in this epilogue, I think this is one of the coolest examples actually of an epilogue that I've read so far, and all it took were a couple of sentences. Now, if to explain this, why does this excerpt really hit me? Why does it serve as a great conclusion? Because it tells the truth of the story of people that take part in organized crime. There is no way out once you get in, and the illusion that you gain from the riches and the power and just like the control that you have over others, or material wealth, that is so temporary when it's at the cost of you possibly losing your life at a younger age. It's true. What happens when a boss dies in a gang? You just initiate somebody else to be the leader. That's just how it works. What happens when one of your henchmen dies? Okay, well, you just initiate another dude right off the block that you think is strong and could carry a gun, and bam, you have somebody else to replace him. What happens when somebody's taking business from you? Well, then you just go kill a couple guys, and then you just expect the repercussions to come towards you, so you just, up the manpower to see how much you can defend. And it's a constant game of cat and mouse that I think Andrew Velasco does a great job at illustrating for us. We watch so many movies, we watch so many pieces of media that kind of illustrates the glamour that can come with being a gangster or being a part of a crime organization or being part of a mob. But, this excerpt and this epilogue, it really tells you that, it's a trap. Anybody that participates in this game is falling into a trap, and it's a toxic cycle that just goes on and on, that's based off of this idolized lifestyle of power, only to realize that the terms, the conditions, labels, it might forfeit your life. I really loved reading this, and this book was a really great book. I really encourage all of you guys to check it out. I want to thank Andrew Velasco for reaching out to Bookbase and just working with us. I think it's been a great experience, and I can't wait for you guys to check it out. I loved reading every page of this book, and for those that are interested in also acquiring a copy for themselves, I'll go ahead and put the description in the I'm losing it. For those that want to acquire a copy of the book, I'll go ahead and put the link to the website in the description below. But with that all being said, thank you guys for watching another book review video. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, check out our other social media outlets. But yeah, thank you guys again, and I'll catch you with the next video. Peace.